Right, it takes 20 seconds for them.
Okay.
Okay, it should be streaming live. And we will be broadcasting now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We're really excited to have you here. We hope everyone is safe and your loved ones are safe given the conditions, of course, right now. But today is the day to celebrate a next journey in your lives and celebrate being accepted to studies in Sweden. My name is Douglas, and I work here at the Swedish Institute, part of the Study in Sweden team. And I am joined by two wonderful people, and one of them is my colleague.
Hi, my name is Adam. I work here at the Swedish Institute. We study in Sweden together with Douglas.
And the other one joining us is the star of the show, Lusanda, from South Africa, joining us from Borås. And she's going to speak a little bit briefly here about what it's like to live and study in Sweden from her perspective as an international student. So let's go on to the next slide here. We just want to share our program with you guys. I'm going to start off with, Adam and I are going to start off with 20 minutes about what it's like to live and study in Sweden. And Adam is actually going to share some details about related to residence permits and some brief information on potential changes due to COVID-19, which I'm sure is kind of top of mind for a lot of you today. Then I'm going to speak a bit more about what it's like to live and study in Sweden from the perspective of an international student. I'm a former international student myself. I've studied here twice. I'm originally from the US and I loved it. And moving to Sweden to study and live here is, I think, one of the best decisions I've made in my life, without a doubt. Then Lusanda is going to speak for 15 minutes from her perspective, give you some tips and recommendations and advice from her side. And then we're going to have some time for a Q&A afterwards as well. So 20, 25, 30 minutes, we'll be answering your questions here, both on YouTube. Yes, special shout out as well to those of you joining us from YouTube Live. This is the first time we've done a YouTube Live, and our wonderful colleague Hannah is moderating the questions live as they come in there. So, with that being said, I would like to pass over to Adam now for some details about the residence permit.
Yes. I'm going to talk about residence permit, and I think something you're all thinking about, the situation with the new coronavirus, COVID-19. And as of now, it's still very unsure what's happening, but we just wanted to tell you what the situation is now. I think this is no news to you, but there is a ban on travel to Sweden, like all of EU, which will last until May 15th. Residents and citizens can still enter. Swedish embassies and consulates abroad are often very limited in their staff and in terms of the job they can do with visa and residence permits. Universities in Sweden are currently recommended to hold distance learning, and they do so. And Swedish citizens and residents are recommended to act cautiously and to restrict their travel. So that's the situation at the moment. For students starting their degrees in Sweden this autumn, the admission selection process, which is finished, it was ongoing as normal. The selection was just as any other year. The same is true for the scholarship selection, which will be announced soon. And the decisions for these two processes were not influenced by COVID-19. When it comes to deadlines for tuition payment, for housing applications, for the submission of document, etc., to your university of admission, you should contact your university, the one you're admitted to. They will have the relevant information for you. It might differ from university to university, so it's really important that you contact the university for any questions. Same is true for the autumn semester start date, the possibility of distance learning, all these things, you should contact your university. They will have the most relevant information for you. When it comes to residence permits, the resident permit application process is open as normal. As always, you apply online for your residence permit if you need to. People who are visa-free, who don't need a visa to travel to Sweden, of course, don't need to apply in the same way. So decisions are not affected by the COVID-19 situation. The decisions are made on the same basis as any other year, but the process of getting your residence permit and the later steps in that process may be disturbed. And this is because embassies, Swedish embassies abroad, their work is very limited at the moment. So yeah, this issuing of the residence permit and visas is and may be affected at embassies. So you should check the information of the relevant Swedish embassy or consulate for you in your region or in your home country. And also, of course, check local and Swedish travel restrictions to make sure you can travel within your country to Sweden, of course. And just to keep up to date, we gathered some links here for you. The most important is to check the website of your University of Admittance. They will have the most relevant information for you. The Swedish Migration Agency's website also has some information. There's a long link here. The Swedish Embassy website, they're listed under swedenabroad.se, and then there's a whole list of embassies. You can go to this address and find your local embassy, check their opening hours, check if they're open as normal. And then finally, there's official information from Sweden under krisinformation.se about the COVID-19 situation at the moment. We will do a separate webinar next week, at the beginning of next week. You got the invitation for this in the same email as the invitation for this webinar. And during that webinar, we will talk to the migration board, and we will focus on residence permit related questions. So during the webinar today, we won't focus on those questions. It's much better to do that next week. So please join us again next week. You can join us in the webinar. You can join us at YouTube. You can find it on YouTube after the webinar as well. But that will have all the relevant information in terms of residence permits. And I think that's it for this part of the presentation. So I'm going to hand over again back to my colleague Douglas.
Great, yeah, thanks, Adam. So, I mean, from our side, we want to apologize that we can't give you, I guess, more clear information about what's going to apply for your residence permit. But of course, I'm sure you understand that there's a lot of uncertainty about the situation. And we certainly, also we empathize with you that this is probably not the situation you were expecting yourself to be in when you found out you were accepted to come to Sweden, and that your first semester might not look, I guess, the way you're anticipating. What we can say from our side is that Swedish universities, there are some who are already planning to offer like distance online courses, and Swedish universities are a really good place to do so. We're really quick to go over to online education this spring, and it's going very, very smoothly. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about Sweden, the country that hopefully you will be living in for around a year or maybe 2 years if you're studying a 2 years master, or 3 years if you're studying a bachelor. Some of you might already be experts about Sweden and know more than Adam and I, and some of you might have just figured out that Sweden and Switzerland are different countries. So we'll start out with some of the basics. So the Swedish is the official, or one of the official languages of Sweden. And it's usually what Swedish people speak to each other. But we should say that Swedes are excellent in speaking English. And you can get by not only in the classroom, but outside the classroom, just speaking English without knowing any Swedish. I know a lot of people who've been here for many years, maybe a decade and they haven't learned any Swedish, I wouldn't recommend that. Try to learn at least a little Swedish, especially if you're interested in starting your career here after your studies or working during your studies. Knowing just a little Swedish is really going to increase the chances of you getting a job. It's going to help you understand the culture and Swedish people. But it's so easy to live here as an English speaker. So do not worry about that as all. So what are some of the things that Sweden is known for? You might have heard of some of these companies popping up on the screen here. IKEA, Volvo, Ericsson, H&M, Skype. If you're into gaming, Mojang Studios, Spotify if you're into music. So what's really interesting is that basically all these companies are the industry leader or among the industry leader in their field. And that's pretty crazy when you consider the population of Sweden is 10 million people. We're the world leader in terms of multinational corporations per capita. There's just a huge amount of innovation in Sweden. Stockholm is the startup capital of Europe and just barely behind Silicon Valley on the global level. So there's something, I think, really unique going on in Sweden. And one of the main reasons for this, for all this creativity, all this innovation, is because Swedish classrooms are just wonderful in helping you how to think creatively, how to think critically and analytically. And these are really important skills once you graduate to get a job. And that's something you're really going to strengthen during your time in Sweden. So here's some basic facts about Sweden. So the currency we use here in Sweden is the Swedish krona. However, just a warning that you're probably hardly going to see any cash in Sweden. Basically, everyone tries to avoid cash like it's the plague here. You're going to use an app probably or your credit card to pay or to transfer money to friends. It's just about a cashless society. The population of Sweden is 10 million people, and the largest cities are Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, Uppsala. You're probably looking at those and thinking those are not large cities at all, and maybe you're from a city that is larger than the entire country of Sweden, which is 10 million people. And yes, that's true, and that's something I think a lot of students really like about Sweden. The pace of daily life is just slower here because there's not that many people and there's quite a bit of space. We're the third largest country geographically in Western Europe. There are 3 major international airports in Sweden or close to Sweden that students use when you come here. Arlanda is close to Stockholm on the east coast, Landvetter is close to Gothenburg on the west coast, and Kastrup is in Copenhagen in Denmark, but very close to Malmö and to Lund. So Sweden is not a very religious country. In fact, it's one of the least religious countries in the world. It's very secular, but it's still very tolerant of other religions. So while 64% of Swedes are members of the Church of Sweden, only 29% of Swedes claim to be religious. So that's, as I said, it's among the most secular countries in the entire world. However, I think we're still very tolerant of different religions, of people who are religious, who have different beliefs. One I think statistic that helps maybe you understand this is that in Sweden, 1 in 3 marriages is a civil wedding, and this number is increasing every year. So I think that kind of just shows you how many Swedes view themselves as religious. And we do know we get a lot of international students who have different religious beliefs, and we think that's wonderful. On this screen, you can see a breakdown of the most popular religions in Sweden. Islam is one of the most popular religions, and if you are practicing Islam and you're really worried about, can you find a mosque in Sweden, you will be able to find a mosque, so you don't need to worry about that. But we want to stress that students from all religions, all beliefs, should feel welcome here. In general, I think Sweden is an extremely tolerant society. So international students tend to really like Sweden, really like living here, really like studying here. And we've also, we're going to share some tips from our international students, things they have told us, shared with us, things that they like, and things they wish they would have known before coming here, as kind of an intro before Lusanda talks to you. So let's dive into that. So depending upon where you live, you will probably just take public transport or a bike or some combination. Very few students, if any, use cars for transportation. You don't need a car to get around here. I'm from the US and I grew up driving, and I don't have a Swedish driver's license, and I've been here for a long time. So that's proof you don't need a car to get around. Public transport works wonderfully in Sweden, and in many cities it's just easier to bike. So that's a tip. If you don't know how to bike, you probably want to start practicing before you come here. Otherwise, you can learn in Sweden. So there's a Swedish saying that we've heard thousands of times. There's no bad weather, just bad clothes. And yes, this is true. What it means here is that, well, I should start off by saying that I'm sure you've probably heard Sweden is cold, and yes, it can be cold here, especially in the north of Sweden, but it's not as cold as most people think. We were really depressed this year because our winter was so mild. Adam and I were looking forward to Nordic skating on the frozen lakes this winter, and it didn't happen. It hardly froze over at all, and we hardly got any snow. Most of Swedes live in the south of Sweden, so in Stockholm or further south, where it's more mild. And the average temperature in the winter is 1 degree Celsius, and it can certainly get colder, and we get snow. But you're never going to be cold indoors in Sweden. Because of indoor heating and because just the quality of the housing here, you're not going to be indoors. But yes, buy a warm winter jacket. So this is a Swedish lesson for you guys. The first word I feel like every international student learns is fika. Swedes love to drink coffee. It's something we do at work, socially, with friends, even on dates. And fika means basically just having a coffee or a tea and maybe some buns, some snacks. And it's something you're going to be doing a lot. We consume the third most coffee in the world, behind Finland and the Netherlands. So start preparing yourself for having lots of fika. If you ever visit Sweden, or when you get here after a long winter in May or June when the sun comes out, you might see a lot of Swedes just kind of staring at the sun like you see in the picture there, soaking up the sunshine. And it can look really strange. It did for me. I was just kind of laughing, wondering what the Swedes are doing during the summer. But as Sweden is far to the north, we get less sunlight during the winter. And I think this is something that international students find really surprising and maybe struggle with a bit more than the cold. I think a lot of people don't have a problem with the cold or the snow, but the darkness is certainly a thing, and dark winters are a thing. And we have on our site lots of tips and advice from students on how to deal with the darkness. On the flip side, that also means during the summer, we have really long days as well. And that's also kind of strange to get used to, as you come home and it's 1 a.m. and it's still sunny out. So it's kind of a cool, interesting contrast, I think. Sweden has amazing nature. This is one of my favorite things about Sweden. We have a wonderful law here called the right to roam, and it means that you can walk basically anywhere you want. You can pass through someone's yard or property as long as you don't damage it. We have wonderful hiking, camping here, amazing nature to explore. So when you do come here, really take the chance to explore not just the cities here, but also the countryside, and definitely bring some comfortable hiking boots as well. Swedes tend to be pretty shy people. If you don't know what to say to Swedes, a safe topic is always to talk about the weather. Swedes I think they're wonderful people, and they tend to be much more honest than other cultures. And that can be perceived as some of them being more reserved initially, whereas I think a lot of you listening are coming from maybe more outgoing cultures. The flip side of that, it means that if they do invite you to dinner at their apartment or something, it means they really see you as a friend. It can take a while to become friends with a Swede, but the good thing is that when you do become friends with them, they're going to be friends with you for the rest of your life. So they're really genuine in their emotions and feelings towards you. Yes, an important tip for you guys. Make sure you arrive on time. Punctuality is a thing in Sweden. There's really no excuses for being late. And this applies both for the classroom, you need to arrive on time for your class, and also meeting friends socially. Luckily, this is possible because public transport is so efficient and almost always on time. If you decide to meet a friend, you really should be on time. There's a window of about 5 minutes beforehand or 1 minute after where it's okay to arrive. If you arrive 5 minutes late, you should probably text them saying, sorry, I'm going to be 5 minutes late. So yes, punctuality is the thing here. Swedes are excellent in recycling. We recycle about 95% of our household waste. We're so efficient, we're asking our neighbors in Norway for their waste. This means you will need to learn all the different bins and symbols and what goes where. But it's important because it's going to be hard to make friends with the Swedes and international students in your corridor if you don't recycle. So I think you've made a wonderful choice to study and live in Sweden. And we're going to give you guys just a few tips on what it's like to study in Sweden. So in Sweden, you will always address your professor by her or his first name. There's really no exceptions. And this is a reflection of Swedish society as a whole, which tends to be extremely informal, extremely non-hierarchical. And I think this is really, there's a lot of benefits about this, I think, both related to working here and studying here, which we're going to talk about. So in Sweden, you get a lot of personal responsibility as a student and as a person in society. And the way this is reflected in the classrooms is that you are responsible for planning your own work. Compared to the US, I spent much less time in the classroom here in Sweden than I did in the US, which means you need to plan your own work. You still have to read the textbook and know the answers, but in terms of planning your work, I think a really good tip is to find a buddy to initially at least structure your work with, and so you can kind of discuss the concepts you've read about in the textbook. In Sweden, you'll be doing a lot of group work, so much group work that you might be completely sick of it by the time you graduate. I have to say. And then you get a job and you'll quickly realize that working is basically like a permanent form of group work. And I have to say that Swedes are absolutely excellent team players, and Swedes and also students, international students like you guys that have studied in Sweden. And this is such a critical skill for you with your career. And I think this is one of the main benefits of studying at a Swedish university is that you do learn to cooperate and work with others really well. And lastly, in Sweden, you are expected to challenge what your professor says if you don't agree with her or him. And as I said earlier, it's normal for there not to be just one correct answer. So you're expected to engage in discussions with your classmates, with your teacher, debate different views, and being able to think critically this is really important, and your professors are going to expect you to have your own thoughts. And it's hard to get used to, and it's challenging, but it's so rewarding, and it really helps you grow as a student. Yeah, so that is our tips. We have some resources here, but I think we can maybe share those after maybe Lusanda.
Yes, I know there's been a lot of links as well, and I'll make sure to share these with you after the webinar as well. All the previous links about the Corona situation as well. But yeah.
So yeah, thanks for listening to me. Now we want to pass over to our star, Lusanda, who has been so patiently waiting. So you can turn on your webcam, Lusanda, when you're ready, and Adam's gonna, I think, give you control of your screen so you can share your presentation as well. Great. And I think you're muted for the moment, but I'll let you sort those things out. And we can also say, so for the Q&A, we can probably, I'm sure Hannah is busy sharing links maybe on YouTube Live, and potentially that's something we can do as well. But sorry, Lusanda.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lusanda. As Doug said, I'm a current student, and I fit in many bags. So I'll just jump into the presentation. Let me just share my screen. All right. Okay. Okay, so hi, hello, Savona to everyone. Hey is in the short greeting that Swedes like to use. It's really cute. So just a quick little intro, what brought me to Sweden. It was literally a Facebook ad. If you follow the Study in Sweden blog, which I really suggest you do, you may have seen that I wrote an article about this, but it was just very random. I'd never really thought about Sweden as a destination before. But then over some time, there were a couple of breadcrumbs because I realized there's a lot of Swedish music I was listening to, a lot of Swedish designers I was interested in. So it kind of all came together, but I heard about the Swedish Institute Scholarship from a Facebook ad, and then it just kind of continued rolling from there. I'm currently studying fashion marketing and management. And that stood out to me because you'll find that there's a lot of people that have very specific courses. I'm sure you saw from when you were in the selection process that you may have come across some very interesting courses. So that also means a lot of the friends that you make, if they're not specific to your course, you meet people that are doing some very interesting things as well. So yeah, I was interested in sustainable fashion. That's why I came. I also really like the idea of nature. And as soon as I heard about the law that lets you roam everywhere, I got so many ideas for hikes and just getting lost in nature. But then winter and my course schedule just all started all together. So I'll get into it, but I definitely suggest that you start out really making the most of your time when you first arrive, because as soon as it turns into autumn and winter, it's not as desirable. But then now that we're coming back into spring, the weather's gotten a lot better. So it's actually like very, very lovely to just go for a walk. And then, of course, the biggest reason I came to Sweden was that I just wanted to challenge myself to go to a different country, to live on my own, and just have a completely different cultural context. So those are a couple, there's of course plenty of reasons, and I'm sure none of you that are on the webinar right now have like a single answer why you came, but I'm glad that you're here. So a little bit more about my experience. I came in early August, so it hasn't been that long, but already there's so much that's happened. The photo on, well, yeah, this photo is an accidental selfie that I took in front of one of the murals in Borås. So I just had a really fun time walking around, showing myself around. And it is very easy to navigate, at least. This is something that I've seen across the different cities. And then this is a shot from when I've like literally just arrived to my apartment. There's something that's very comforting if you do manage to book your accommodation before you arrive. There is something that's very comforting to not have the stress of where you're staying is temporary, you still have to find somewhere else. So I do encourage you to start the accommodation search sooner rather than later so that it's not so difficult when you arrive. And there are more blog articles about this as well. But I tried not to bring too many things with me, because some advice that I got when I was on these sessions is that you can do a lot of shopping secondhand. And this is true. So I only came with about 2 suitcases, and it was very basic things. And then over time, I've really built up my winter jacket, for example, or even my cutlery and crockery or furniture that's in my apartment. All of that I managed to get secondhand, and there's a lot of different stores that you can go to do that as well. So yeah, so it's going to depend. Like everyone may have their things that they feel like they need to bring, but you don't have to bring the whole world with you either. You can find it here. So like you don't need to bring a cooking pan. You can find that. So I packed lights. And then very shortly after I arrived, there was this magical period where there was like, you know, a few weeks before we started with that course. And I, again, really want to encourage you to just throw yourself into the venture of meeting people and making friends. Because as soon as you gain the momentum with your course, it gets a lot harder to manage that. Coming back to what Adam said, that you manage your own time. So you really have to schedule your fun time just as much as you scheduled your academic time. But I arrived and I just went to music festivals. So if there's an event that you're specifically interested in, start looking that up the closer you get to that date, and then maybe book those tickets so that you have something that will get you out there, especially if you struggle a little bit to meet people. That's what helped me. So I went to the Way Out West Festival, made a couple of friends. I'm not going to bombard you with the list of apps that you can use because there's still a bit of time to get there, but you will land up using a lot of your phone to help you get around. So like Google Maps, of course, and even the public transport for the trams and the trains and everything, you'll end up using your phone quite a lot. So if it wasn't for that, then yeah, I was definitely going to get lost. And getting a SIM card sooner rather than later is something else that I'd advise, because again, it was much easier once I was able to show myself around. But I got a lot of support, especially in the beginning, from the Swedish Institute. I'm a scholarship holder, so they've put us into into a network. And what's really great is that I got to touch base with people from my country and people that are also in the scholarship from all over. So I'm studying in Borås, which is a smaller city, so we don't really have so many people. But if you're in any of the bigger student cities, a lot of my friends have incredible experiences with their networks where they will do talks or they'll do projects. So that is in itself an opportunity. So I also encourage you, well, I'm wishing all of you good luck. There'll be more to come if you do get the scholarship, but even if you don't, just look up any local networks as soon as you arrive in that city. And yeah, depending on the hobby that you have, it's also a very good way to have something that you can keep yourself busy with, but at the same time, really be able to just get out of yourself and meet people. So in that adjustment of coming back into school, I also joined the study and student team, which has been really fun. That's been a chance for me to connect with other students as well. And I get to talk about my experiences. So that's been a huge part about me coming here. And I'm a major fan of the study and student team. I love my colleagues and I love the platform as well. I used it a lot for everything, especially in this time, those weeks when you're not sure what's about to happen. You can probably find a blog for anything that you're worried about. And also follow our Instagram quite closely, because we're also trying to update that. And we're also here to just answer any more of your questions, especially since a lot of them aren't as easy. You're not going to find all of them in the blog. But yeah, so I'm now doing the thing that actually helped me a lot, just with stuff like making friends or secondhand shopping or so I really use the resource quite a lot. And then I also had to adjust to being back in school. And I want to come back to what Adam said about the culture for campus life. It's on the one hand quite casual, because like he said, there's no hierarchy. And it is a very like casual space. It's the biggest campus that I've been to, but that's just my personal academic career. But I definitely suggest using journals or calendars or any tools that you know would work for you to help you manage your time. So I've put in an example of a diary, and it is very full, but it was necessary for me to see what the days would look like to actually, plan my time. So I actually feel so much more comfortable when I have a schedule that's set like this. And it's a very good habit to have, especially when things get more uncertain. But yeah, then there's also just adjusting to finding the right room. And this is something I encourage you to check with really pay attention when you get to your university orientation, because they'll have their own guides on like how you can make sure you don't get lost around campus. So that is quite an adjustment, especially if you're doing like a master's program and you've been working for quite some time. So give yourself some time to adjust, be forgiving with yourself with adjusting, because I thought, oh, I've done this before, but yeah, just remember it's still gonna be quite new. But that being said, what was really fun, because I'm not only here for studying, otherwise, you know, there's places much closer to home that I could have gone. Like I said, I was really interested to just get out there and make the most of the experience. So I definitely encourage traveling around, even if it's just to go to like a neighboring city, if it's to get an Airbnb. I've traveled throughout all the seasons, and you can get trains, you can get buses. It's so much more manageable that way, that you don't have to stress about a car. And there's a lot of student discounts as well. If you use the Mecenat app, that's super helpful. But yeah, I've stayed at Airbnbs in Habo. I've like traveled to Stockholm. We've traveled to Rokendal as the team. And that's really been a lot of my memories that I've taken that fulfilled that desire that I had to come to Sweden. So make sure that you are keeping that in the back of your mind. If you see there's like a little window, like 3 or 4 days, and you have a little bit of money saved, I definitely encourage just traveling a little bit. It's going to make the experience so much fuller. And that's what I've enjoyed probably the most. There's also really beautiful buildings that I have plenty of them, but they all start to look a bit the same. But it's also very interesting to see the contrast of like some buildings within the suburbs, and then within the city, and then depending on like the size of the city. So if you're really into architecture, you're going to spend a lot of time just like looking up and around, just appreciating the buildings. That's been really fun for me. I have a lot of photos full of buildings. And coming back to nature, which was very important for me. Across the seasons, there's always something that's beautiful. There's a lake that I've gone to throughout the seasons that changes every single time I go. And there's a lot of walking trails and stuff that's encouraged. I've even got an outdoor guide. So there's plenty of resources that encourage you to spend that time to walk and explore nature, of course, under the current guidelines of Corona. But it is good to have the access to such beautiful forests, and especially even in winter when it's snowing, there's still something that's really beautiful to see. And I also got this photo that just encapsulates the 4 different seasons. Something that you need to prepare for is that you will never be prepared for the seasons. As much as I thought I would be prepared, just be ready to be surprised constantly. And even in a single day, the seasons can fluctuate so much. But there's a beauty in all of them. So these are some of my favorite sunsets, whether that was in autumn or in summer or in spring. So there's something to embrace about that shift in the seasons, that there's always something that's very beautiful. And it's not going to be easy the entire time, because winter, the darkness is definitely what is hard, coming back to what Adam said. But after some time, you land up appreciating the beauty of that as well. So I also encourage you to just document your experience as much as possible. Even if it seems like it's something that you know, it doesn't really matter that much. At some point, it will matter a lot to you, because years from now, if you land up not staying, hopefully you will, it's going to just trigger like a whole lot of memories of that time. And then the last thing that I really enjoy is the quirkiness. So also keep your eye out for some interesting visual surprises. There's always like something quirky that I never expect to find. But in Borås, for example, we have a lot of murals, and it is part of a festival where they have a lot of people that do wall art. But every city that you go to will have some beautiful arts, and just like quirky surprises. So like we have this SpongeBob. It's like a maintenance panel, but it's been turned into a SpongeBob. So I say hi to him every time that I've gone to class. Things that are under bridges, even some graffiti that's like designated areas for it. Even in Christmas, all across the different cultural holidays that happen in Sweden, you can also observe some very interesting, quirky little sculptures and tidbits. And then I also got this one from the secondhand store. As I've mentioned earlier, secondhand shopping is the best way to go. It's much cheaper, it's better for the planet. And well, I mean, you also find some very incredible once-off pieces like this. I didn't buy it, I just thought that they were really cute. Yeah, so I definitely recommend to just like keep your eyes open for every part of the experience. The big takeaway is to just prioritize your balance as far as you're not only there for school, and it's good to make friends, it's good to schedule time for yourself that's social, and it's good to schedule time that is fun. And that's part of the most enriched experience. But from there, I wish you all good luck. And that's my presentation. So I'll start the share.
Thank you very much, Lusanda. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by the local Borås hiking. You just got back from a hike before this.
Yes, I did. I did come back from a hike and we almost got lost, but the trails are also very easy to follow. So we were getting lost because we were being silly, but yeah.
We're spending more time out in nature at the moment because we're not really going to our workplaces, our universities, restaurants, whatever. So I hear it's like a booming nature tourism in Sweden at the moment.
Yeah, and this sun out. The thing that Adam mentioned before, that you'll see people just looking at the sun, it's real. And after you've been through a winter, you'll join in happily. Very lovely.
Yeah, you will do it as well. Yeah, thanks, Lusanda. That was such a nice presentation. Yeah, are you in your student room?
I am in my student room. Okay. Nice. It's just a little bit messy, so I'm not gonna do a full tour, but it is sizable from.
It looks like a student room. Yeah.
Great. I thought we would go over to some questions. We have quite a lot of questions from the audience. We of course also have questions in our YouTube stream. One of my colleagues is answering questions there in the comments.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. And we'll answer the questions from the participants here in Zoom. So let's just dive in. We have a couple of questions about working during your studies. Is it possible to work during your studies? What with the time managing problems and language problems in working in Sweden? And I can just say from the get-go that the residence permit that you get as a student in Sweden, it allows you to work basically without any limitation. With that said, your degree is a full-time, it's meant to be a full-time activity, so there might not be time to do a lot of work. And if it's a plan to try to work to make enough money to study, that can be a really, really big challenge. But yes, it is possible. And I don't know, Lusanda, do you have any experience of working in Sweden?
We know you have experience, Lusanda.
I don't know if I count. It doesn't feel so much like work because it's the most fun work that I think I've had. but that being said, I'm doing something that I enjoy. So from my friends that are working part-time, they do say that it is quite a struggle. And the university will also send resources. They'll send emails if they're looking for someone that's casual, that's made for student work. But a lot of people struggle. So it's kind of, it has to be a very ideal situation where you not being so fluent in Swedish doesn't work against you, where you're able to manage it with your schedule, you're able to manage your energy as well. So I wouldn't recommend to everyone, but it's not impossible. It's just really hard.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Yeah. And we can also say that if you do want to work in Sweden after your studies, I mean, we do get students who stay here and work, and you can work in Sweden. You can work I don't know if you have 6 months to look for a job, or if it's been extended to 12 now.
Oh,
Right, which is a new change, I think. But I mean, Sweden's a great place to work, I think. I don't want to say that it's easy to get a job here, but it is a really nice place to work and get some international work experience. And if you do get a job here, you can just keep kind of extending your residence permit and keep living here and working here. Yeah, like I've done, I guess. And yeah.
This is a great segue to the next question, because the previous question was also about the language constraints. And the next question is about whether you can study Swedish. And I mean, I'd say it's always good to know some Swedish when you're looking for a job here. There's some jobs that are available even if you don't speak Swedish, but it certainly helps. And even more so, it's great to learn some Swedish just to kind of get into the culture. It'll improve your chances once you've graduated to find a job. Yes, it is possible to study Swedish. It depends a little bit from city to city, but usually either the municipality or the university or both will offer Swedish language classes that can be combined with your university degree. There are also online classes. We, in the Swedish Institute, we have a website called learningswedish.se, where you can start studying some basic Swedish phrases. Yeah.
Lusanda, are you studying Swedish?
not currently, just because of my course load, but I started off with Intro Swedish, which was really helpful. I think the only hard thing is practicing. Because if you are learning Swedish, if you try to initiate a conversation with a Swede, a lot of people already are fluent in English, so they'll sense it and then they'll just switch. So you kind of need to make practice buddies. So a lot of my friends that have like started dating a Swede or something like that have gotten way more practice because they have someone willing to practice with them. So that's the hard part, but it's definitely helpful. Especially because there are still some things that won't be easy to translate or won't, like some road signs, for example, or some web pages as well. Like they're a little bit tricky if you try to use the Google Translate. So if you have just like a little bit of an understanding, it goes a long way.
I totally agree with you about why it's hard to learn Swedish. Spoken in English.
But yours is way better than mine.
You don't have to speak Swedish, which makes it even harder.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of questions about residence. Hannah's, I think, also got a lot of questions about residence permits and if students should still apply for the residence permit as early as possible. So after you've paid the first installment of the tuition fee, just given the uncertainty on traveling to Sweden and given the uncertainty some of our foreign missions are having as well, being able to take visitors. So Adam, what's your advice for those students and all these questions we're getting?
Right, so the advice is same as ever. It's good to apply early, or at least well in advance. Although when you apply, you have to have a complete set of the documents you need, so don't rush it. Of course, you need to pay your tuition fee before you can apply. But yeah, it is still good to apply early, even this year. The application is still done online. It's the same as every year. And the process will look different because the later part of the process, when you need to go to your local embassy, that whole bit might be very different this year and there might be big problems. And we're going to go into detail on residence permits, how to apply for residence permits, what the whole process looks like in our webinars next week, when we'll actually have an expert to help you answer. But yeah, our advice for now is still to apply early. And I know, there's issues about paying your tuition fee, applying, and then worrying about the fact that you don't know what's going to happen in the autumn, if you can travel to Sweden. And for that, I think the best advice is that you contact your university of admission, because they have the most relevant information. In many cases, they might be able to refund you under special circumstances like this, but you really need to check with them. So yeah, but our general advice is to apply for the residence permit.
Yeah, I think it's very normal for a lot of universities to offer refunds if you can't come here for residence permit reasons, just with Corona. But as Adam says, speak to your university. We're also getting questions from students who are wondering about like fee reductions, if there's going to be parts of the program which is through distance learning, through online, if students can't come here for this first semester. And our answer there is also just the same, that you have to speak to the university you're accepted to get that information. We really apologize if we can't give you guys better information about this, but it's just university specific information. And it's a scenario where it's kind of, we're getting more and more information each day as it goes on. So it's hard for us to give you guys super useful information, unfortunately, at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And on the same note about distance learning, like I said before, already now some universities or all universities have started distance learning. Students aren't really going to classrooms anymore. And in this autumn, it's still undecided. Some universities, all the universities are in discussion about how they're going to plan their autumn semester. Some portion of the autumn semester at some universities might well be partly distance learning. So this is something you really have to contact your university. They will know what the situation is for your specific program. And that's, of course, really good to know, because then you know if you need to go to Sweden already from the start of the semester, if you can start from home and then come to Sweden later. These are all things you really need to check with your university.
Lusanda, what are your thoughts so far on online classes? How has it been going for you?
I'm strangely an exception to this because we've already gone into an independent study part of the semester.
Okay.
So far I've only had to correspond when I've needed to, and it's been one-on-one. But I have spoken to my friends at other colleges, and they've said it's obviously challenging because we're not all used to studying in that environment, but in some ways it's easier for some people because then you've got everything from the comfort of your home. But then of course, like it's very, very different from having an in-person chat, and also trying to get your answers in there if a question's been raised is a lot harder.
And if we haven't said this, I know you said it, Lusanda, just so everyone knows, Lusanda is one of our digital ambassadors working for us. And if you guys want to get in touch with Lusanda or our other digital ambassadors, you can do through our Instagram, for example, send them messages. They post videos to our YouTube and our wonderful student blog as well, where you guys do an awesome job of sharing all sorts of different tips as well. And we are also on Chinese social media, but study in Sweden, basically, on all those channels. Yeah.
We actually had a question for Lusanda specifically. I lost it, but it is right here. We have some students from South Africa saying hi as well.
Hello.
So it's like a question about the cost of living. We have a couple of questions on that topic. What is the cost of living on average in a place like Borås, Gothenburg, Western Sweden, in comparison to South Africa? I'm from Namibia, and so my cost of living is benchmarked against the rand. So this might give me a good idea. But I think
against the rand?
Yeah.
That's like very specific. Like, yeah, I can help with that.
Wider answer to all the students, but
yeah. I would say in general, from what my friends have said, some things are more expensive than they expected. So you definitely have to adjust your lifestyle to a student lifestyle. But I will say the recommendation that they have from the migration agency, if you are applying for the residence permit, they have a prescribed amount of money that you can say you will be able to support yourself with. That is there for a reason, because that amount, I think, is like the bare minimum that someone could get by with. And it really depends on a lot of factors. Like, I think I'm lucky on many fronts because I have a scholarship. So that goes quite a long way. But secondly, Borås is also not very populated. So there isn't so much demand for housing. If you go to somewhere like Stockholm or Gothenburg, it is a reality that it's very much in demand. So you'll end up paying quite more than I'd have to pay in Borås. So it really depends on where you are regionally. This is something that I think your university would also be able to advise you on. If you ask them, they could direct you to the housing agency specifically for where you are. But other than that, food, I'd say, it's so much cheaper for you to cook for yourself, and it's much cheaper for you to buy groceries from like well, yeah, there's plenty of supermarkets, but even like the local shops, that's what's much cheaper to do, because eating out, for example, like for a pizza or burger, that's definitely a lot more expensive. It's much more of a treat than I'm used to, because I think in South Africa, a pizza would be, to translate this to the person who asked specifically about rands, a pizza that would probably be something like 75 rand for like a large pizza. That could translate to being something like 200, depending on where you go. But yeah, it could be like 200. And that's like with very loose translation. So from my understanding, part of that is because the workforce also has a very fair wage. So you're also paying a lot for their labor, but then it's not really culturally required for you to tip because they are quite well paid. So that's how I understand it. But you can definitely look at the blogs for the student budgeting diaries, just to get an idea of like how a lot of us in different cities save. We've tried to do it as a series. So we have some in Lund and in Stockholm, but it really depends on what your lifestyle is. But I recommend use the student discounts like the Mecenat app. I also recommend to plan your purchases. So going out for like a night and having like a party, if you don't set a budget for yourself for how much you can spend, that can also land up you costing way more money than if you've said, okay, this is how much I'm spending and that's it. And then learning to cook for yourself, buying secondhand, I thoroughly recommend it. There's so many secondhand stores which have everything, except for food, of course. But yeah, so you find a lot of things that are at the fraction of the price. So it's very agreeable for a student budget. So there's solutions for it, but like I'm saying, you may just have to adjust your lifestyle a little bit.
Super good answer.
Yeah,
I think.
really good.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a question for my colleague here as well. As an American studying in Sweden, what was the biggest culture shock or difference that you noticed from the US? And how was your education recognized and sought by employees back in the US, if you return back?
Good questions. My parents asked me these questions as well. So honestly, I didn't feel like Sweden, studying in Sweden was that much different from the US. I thought it was pretty similar, though I had a little less time in the classroom in Sweden, and instead more group work and independent study. So I would say really similar. And then in terms of how the education was valued in the US, well, I have stayed in Sweden since I graduated with my master's here. So I'm basically speaking from the experience of my friends. I know a lot of other Americans who've studied in Sweden and gone back, and it's certainly valued. What I can say is that you're going to be paying probably half of what you would pay in the US for a similarly ranked master's program. So studying in Sweden is way cheaper in terms of tuition fee for what you're going to be paying in the US in terms of the quality of the classroom, and also I think just the quality of kind of the other students you're around in terms of their life experiences, the international mix. That's probably the biggest difference actually, is the Swedish classrooms were so much more international. The Swedes who I studied with, they had way more life experience and work experience than a lot of American students who go right from high school to a bachelor's. So yeah, that was the biggest difference, and that was something that was just so positive that I would have been really hard to get in the US.
Perfect. Let's see if we can take one more question. We're already sort of out of time, but if it's okay, let's see. We do still get a lot of questions about the coronavirus, residence permit, difficult questions to answer, but like I said, just keep watching the website for your university, stay in touch with your university. I'll put up the links, the relevant links as well, again here, and you'll find them on the YouTube video as well. So we're streaming on YouTube, and that video is still available on YouTube after the webinar. So you can go back and check everything there as well.
And tune into next week's webinar.
Yeah, exactly. Next week, we'll do webinars specifically on the residence permit. Let's see. Right, we have something about finding accommodation, which is a tricky one. But maybe we can say something about what it's like to find an accommodation and give some advice. I think my main advice to find student accommodation is to really start looking early. Contact your university, get those resources from the university. They have already like all the information you need. And yeah, so that's, I think, best first advice from my end. Lusanda, what was your experience?
I agree, start early and correspond with the university directly. Like you said, they'll be able to guide you which forums are easier. They'll also probably have Facebook groups that you can use to find other people to stay with. It's a mixed bag. It depends, like I said, if you're in Stockholm, much more demand. You also really need to start early because there's a queuing system. And like when I signed on, I had to register. And from that date that I registered, I got points for every day that I was in the queue. So really the sooner the better, but also don't send money online if it's not reputable. So if it's someone you found on Facebook, so be wary, because I know it's a little bit strange to book accommodation before you get to see it, but run the options through the university so that you're not getting scammed. Unfortunately, some people have been before, but yeah, you can get student accommodation through those formal channels, but there are Facebook groups as well. It's really helpful to, if you arrive and you still don't have an option yet, it's not game over. I have plenty of friends who arrived, didn't know what the accommodation situation was going to be. And then they stayed at an Airbnb, or they stayed with a friend of a friend of a friend for a few weeks until eventually they found something. So it's not terrible, but please don't be in that situation because it's a lot of stress. So as soon as you get the confirmation that your residence permit is happening, you want to like be ready to book, but you should have started looking and just getting a hang of it, and like checking out on Facebook as well what the comments are that people say, oh, this is super close to school, and you might be like, I don't know, I maybe want something that's like a bit more suburban. So you want this in the back of your mind sooner rather than too late.
Really good advice. And also, I mean, there are a lot of universities that do offer and guarantee accommodation for students as well. So if that's the case for you, you're it'll be a lot easier.
Oh, and you also might get priority. If you're an international student, the queues may favor you as an international student. So use that to your advantage. I think you're on mute. Adam, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Cool.
Sorry. Okay. I'm sharing my screen, and these are the links I just wanted to show you to finish off our webinar today. Same as before, this is the information you're gonna want to check for the COVID-19 situation. So it's always good to keep a check on your university website. All the emails you get from your university, that's the most relevant information. The Swedish Migration Board, Migration Agency, they have a website specifically about the new coronavirus. Your local Swedish embassy, it's good to check that to make sure that you know if they're open or not, when you can visit them to do whatever you need for your residence permit. And then we have this general Swedish site for coronavirus information. So yeah, we'll try to send out some links, and they'll be in the YouTube video as well. So that's www.youtube.com/studyinSwedenofficial. So yeah.
Yeah, Lusanda, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
For having me.
Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. We realize there's still some question marks, that we can't answer, and really no one can answer right now. So we have our fingers crossed, of course, for you guys and for your families and loved ones, wherever you are. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And we hope to see you guys in Sweden.
Yeah. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.